Hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining me tonight. My name is Michael Cundick, or Michael the Mayor. I am the Green Party candidate for Salt Lake County Mayor here in Salt Lake County, Utah. And I am really grateful to have one of my living heroes here on the live stream tonight that we do every Tuesday. Charles Eisenstein has been a huge inspiration to me for many, many years and has helped form a lot of the ethical and community action ethics and principles that I live by and intend to embody, not just in this campaign, but whatever it means to organize and be political in a sense. My slogan is to be in service to life, which is a phrase that I have heard Charles use many times as well. And so it is a huge honor to have Charles here tonight. And I wanted to kind of set the stage just a little bit for why I feel this opportunity to speak with one of my mentors is so meaningful. Here in Utah, we have an extremely conservative state that has a lot of really special things about it, but there's also a lot of really difficult things that are going on in our communities, things that can almost seem unsurmountable at times. And to be coming into this race for a very prominent position as a tattooed millennial musician, community activist, organic farmer is kind of a crazy story, especially in doing it in one of the most difficult places politically, which is Utah. For those that have ever traveled through Utah or along the Wasatch Front, our big mountain range here during the winter, we often get these really intense inversions, which causes an insane amount of pollution, makes it very difficult to feel held by a thriving ecosystem and a thriving region when you're dealing with that kind of air pollution. And so for me, organizing here, it's kind of like being in Mordor in a way, bringing that ring, that Frodo's ring, and decided to try to transform things right in a place that could be almost the hardest place to go up against. And it's really amazing to be able to hold space for that possibility as a Green Party candidate and being who I am with a background in air quality activism, musician. I've been hugely passionate about urban farming and gardening ever since I learned about regenerative agriculture almost a decade ago. And all of these things have come together where the Green Party said, please run. Your record of community activism is the kind of energy we need to build the party and to also hold space for this potentially extremely interesting news that someone like me could come into a place of political authority in a very unusual place for that. So a lot of my followers thus far have heard me talk about the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. I kind of twist it a little bit and call it the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible to kind of tie it to place here. But I thought maybe rather than hearing me rant about it, it would be amazing to hear from the man who wrote the book on the topic, Charles Eisenstein. So thank you, Charles, for zooming in with us today and for being here. It means a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. It's my pleasure.
And maybe that first, I'm sure you get this question a lot, just what is the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible? And I imagine it probably evolves for you. What does that mean to you maybe today?
Yeah, I never have tried to fully describe it because I can't describe it. All I know is that it exists. And the reason I know it exists is because I've seen previews of little pieces of it in the form of various experiences in my life, projects that I come across, people that I come across, social and material technologies that I come across, healing technologies that seem like they're kind of from a different world or from a future world. They don't quite fit in with the mainstream dominant paradigms and systems that we live in right now. And they also don't seem like they're just some kind of anomaly or exception. But they say to me, when I experience one of these things, they say to me, a world could be built on this. And I trust that intuition. even when my mind says couldn't happen, that our problems are too big, the momentum is too great, we're never going to make any real changes. And I can't overcome the logic of the mind. I mean, I can give you reasons why huge change is possible, but there's no guarantee. The heart has a different understanding, though. So that's why I call it that the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. But, I'm not going to try to describe it. Everybody has their own view of what could be. And when we share bits and pieces of it, we have a mutual recognition.
Beautiful. What are perhaps some of the bits and pieces you've witnessed recently? I know you talk with all kinds of people all over the world and have gotten some really beautiful connections. Maybe just a little bit of down to earth about what has popped up recently that seems to be from that other world a little bit.
I saw a video by a woman, or about a woman, Anna Breyenbach, I think is how you say her last name. She's an animal communicator. And she was simply talking about shark attacks and communicated with the sharks and tried to figure out why are they attacking humans. And what she said so rang with truth. There was just no doubt in any cell of my body that she nailed it. She was talking about the dwindling food supply of great white sharks. So they're getting very competitive with each other. And then there's people in the water who are also in a very competitive mind frame, surfers. And so the sharks play off that energy, and then they come and check you out. And you go into a terror response, and they get confused, and they take a bite. They actually never eat people. Humans are not their prey. We're not supposed to, that's not the relationship that we're supposed to have with sharks. So she said, when you're in the water, be peaceful. And if you're peaceful, you will electromagnetically radiate that out. And the sharks are very sensitive to that. Mm-hmm. And the message was not only, in relation to sharks and this idea that you carry peace and you will experience peace, but that seemed to translate into our present times as well, with all of the fear running rampant. On one level, people being terrified of coronavirus, and on another level, people being terrified of the totalitarian response to coronavirus. What those two sides, which seem diametrically opposed, have in common is that they're both running scared. And if we really want to change that situation, we have to access something else besides the fear. Otherwise, it's just like the shark. We're just adding to the total level of fear. So that would, like, that kind of animal communication, that kind of access to information that doesn't depend on taking things apart. It doesn't depend on measuring and quantifying and taking specimens and dissecting them in a laboratory. Analysis, which means taking things apart, that word means to cut it apart. It doesn't depend on that. It depends on observation, listening, and empathy. What is it like to be a shark? And you really go into that. So that is one of those threads of a new world. What would the world be like if we approached it with the mantra, what is it like to be you? As a politician, that's a pretty powerful mantra, because it'll enable you to speak to people.
And the analogy of being in the ocean with sharks could be fairly appropriate as well. Imagine what it would be if the purpose of politics was to translate and communicate peace. I mean, just hearing that, I'm already trying to embody the lesson even within that first idea. Mm-hmm. Like what, and that does not seem to be the usual pace or message that I'm getting from politicians when I watch what's going on and being kind of thrown into this and daring to believe that the future of politics, like if this world does change meaningfully, and that transformation that a lot of us feel is possible, mostly in our hearts, when it happens, the political system is going to have to evolve and adapt alongside it for a true transformation to take place. And again, if not that it has to happen in 6 months for me, it could be that we're more like 6 years, or heck, maybe it's 60 years away from anything this truly transformative. But if I were to win in 6 months here, it would kind of be like if Frodo was like announced as the new regent of Mordor. It would be not just local news, it would be national, potentially global, capturing the imagination, I believe, of the tens of, if not hundreds of millions of people that know that a reunion, an ecological reconnection, that the web of life needs to be honored. And it's a strange thing to bring this kind of message and spirit into politics. I'm grateful that I'm here with you now and having this opportunity to hold that space. I wonder, what would politics look like, or communal governance look like, in the more beautiful world of Charles Eisenstein?
I think it's more, a better question is, what's the next step toward that, rather than painting these fantasies of a distant future. It definitely involves a lot more listening. Whereas today, the default posture in politics is, I'm right, you're wrong. I'm good, you're bad. Those horrible people on the other side. The way that you rally the troops and attract people to your candidacy is by attacking those that they hate too, thereby establishing that I'm one of us. I'm on our side. That approach is, well, if you're on the side with the biggest numbers, that is a winning approach. But overall, because political fault lines divide the population pretty evenly, overall, that is a formula for paralysis. Two sides in a tug of war, straining desperately to move that cup that's tied in the middle of the rope onto their side. Imagine, and so, one side pulls it a little bit, the other side pulls a little bit. Sometimes you make some headway, and tremendous effort for very little effect. Imagine if we were in coherency, how far we could move the cup, not just forward and backward, but left and right. We can do anything. So the possibility that for humans in coordinated action, in common cause, is just tremendous. I mean, we've seen the changes that have happened during the COVID-19 pandemic, unimaginable changes to society. Maybe not good ones, but enormous ones. And it tells us, what could we do moving forward if we are in this kind of coherency? For there to be that, we have to adopt a perceptual set, a way of seeing the world that even allows that coherency to happen, that doesn't erect other people as the enemy, that doesn't see anybody as irredeemable, that recognizes that we share a basic humanity and that almost everybody wants pretty much the same things. So this is, I think, becoming actually more accessible during this pandemic, when left and right are getting kind of mixed up. You spoke about your background as an organic gardener, organic farmer, regeneration, like this kind of stuff. This is, people have been going organic for, since the 60s, really. That's when the movement got started. I guess you could trace it back to Rodale in the 40s, but all along it's mostly been the hippies, the fringe, the people outside the mainstream, the liberals, the leftists who have been into the organic food, into the holistic medicine, into the yoga, who have been saying question authority, question the man. Now there's this weird inversion where if you are critical of the official narrative around COVID, then all of a sudden you're like a right-wing conspiracy theorist Trump supporter. And I'm like, okay, hold on here. Who's left and who's right? So what I'm saying is that this is an opportunity to reach across traditional boundaries and to speak to the widespread disaffection with the way things have been. And that can transcend our political definitions right now. So maybe someone like you does have a chance if you're coming with that mindset rather than, I'm this embattled minority party and arrayed against powerful conservative forces.
Yeah, bringing that unification is so crucial, and it does seem to really show itself the more that communities are in relationship to one another. Like, I know physically that is an interesting challenge to bring up here during this COVID-19 situation, but there is a sense that many people are disconnected from their neighbors, they're disconnected from where they live, the place in which they live. And something I've been just diving in on is gardening like crazy, especially since this pandemic hit. There's been all kinds of people asking, how do I start gardens? How do I farm? Because they're concerned about their food supply, and maybe it's been on their bucket list for a long time. They've known that they want to grow food, and now they're finally stepping into that. And I've been in a really blessed position with this acre community food forest and farm called the Krishna Food Forest and Farm. We grow food for about 40 families with a CSA program. And we also have all of our resources and materials available to the community. And we've done 10 different garden installs kind of in that same neighborhood or neighborhoods of the temple. And it really makes it clear to me that we need to have more, I wish there was a center for neighborhood resilience, gardening, healing, mutual aid within walking distance of everyone's neighborhood. And I feel like when you have those kinds of opportunities, a lot of the division that seems to be so apparent and yet perhaps is more manufactured digitally than we care to actually realize when we actually take the moment to get out in the sun and do these things as communities. And I know with your background having written sacred economics as well, to me, like, having a center like that is something the county could really have a lot to do with. I think a lot of local politicians could make efforts towards that, and it could really open up a lot of doors when it comes to mutual aid and alternative economies. This is one area that I have been putting a lot of my effort into and think the campaign could help with. And I'm curious how that feels to you. Like, what kind of possibilities happen when we're more in relationship like that?
Well, yeah, I think that there's an awful lot of potential in that, because the desire for community and the anguish at the loss of community, again, that's something that transcends partisan divisions. People who identify as conservative, when I speak to them about this, no kids playing outside anymore, neighbors not knowing each other anymore, like that kind of decline in community, that speaks to people, regardless of political affiliation. So that could be something that would be really well received and could build. That's the kind of thing that can build a movement that isn't limited by political boundaries. It starts out, because it's not an issue that is polarized politically, but it's kind of universal. It allows a movement to be built that isn't contained within the walls of one of the two parties. And I think that, unless your vision of political healing involves one party finally prevailing once and for all over the other, then something like that, some kind of transpartisan movement, is essential.
And it seems like the kind of thing that the Green Party would be particularly good at spearheading, since there's been such gridlock around the environment and ecology on the broader federal level. I don't know if you ever read the book Ecotopia or Ecotopia Rising, but it really paints a beautiful picture about what a grassroots, neighborhood-based political system would really look like. It's this kind of fictional but could have happened story about how Northern California, Oregon, and Washington just seceded from the Union entirely. And it's a really fascinating read, fun to look at. It kind of strikes me that it's too simplistic to have simply two parties in the mix in this endless tug of war. I think almost every other country in the world, even the UK, have multiple parties that have to learn how to work together to really paint a more three-dimensional, or hopefully even four-dimensional picture of what's going on, and the best ways to listen and make decisions. Do you see a more complex political system kind of emerging around some of these ecological and community-based ideas?
I think it's a possibility. I don't think that we're quite at that point yet. I think that the next stage is continued dissolution and chaos. It's only from chaos that new order can arise. Only from breakdown that anything new can come at this point, because we're so frozen into our existing categories.
So something I would love to talk about, for one, we're streaming right now, and we love to hear comments and questions. If anyone wants to participate that way, we'll be keeping an eye on that. And also, it really helps to share this. If you're in a spot where you can start a watch party or share to some of your favorite groups, we really appreciate that energy and support. Something that's on my mind heavily is this movement for ecology, right? Here in Salt Lake Valley, as beautiful as it can be in this state, we have things like one of the world's largest open pit mines. We are under construction for 20,000 acres of prime wetlands next to the Great Salt Lake, where they want to put something called an inland port to help bring in and extract more fossil fuels from our beautiful public lands, and have this enormous kind of industrial complex that they think will help put us on the map economically. But it is it's such an interesting place to try to build a trans party movement around healthy ecology. And you've talked recently about how this example with COVID-19 has shown us what is possible when we come together around an issue. And I know that one of the big, like, I loved your book, Climate, A New Story, for many of these reasons. So what can we do in perhaps one of the hardest places in the country to have this discussion around ecology and do what we've got to do to protect our biosphere for future generations?
I mean, I don't know the innards of the politics of your area and the different conflicting interest groups and all that kind of stuff. So I'm probably not the person to ask, but I could say maybe one thing to think about would be to avoid language that triggers unthinking partisan identification. So if you're talking about, say, regenerative agriculture, maybe you don't talk about, CO2 sequestration. Maybe instead you talk about restoring America's soils, or local food sovereignty, or food freedom, or something like that. Like, there are ways you can describe something that are not code words for what one side wants. What's happened today is that environmentalism, I mean, for most conservatives or Republicans, that's become like this dirty word, where it's, I read some of the right-wing sites, it's like climate change is this hoax perpetrated in order to institute one world socialism or something like that. And on the Democrat side, environmentalism gets mostly focused onto climate change, which ends up serving corporate interests. And like that gigantic mine you're talking about, that's kind of off the radar if you're talking only about carbon dioxide. You know, mining, I mean, yeah, like it has a certain, it produces a certain amount of fossil fuel of emissions, but it's off the calculus. You know, you could do it with, you know, biofuels and clean energy or something like that, do the mining. So I think that there's a big opportunity to reframe issues in ways that don't trigger partisan identity. And in a place like Utah, where environmentalism is immediately associated with the left, the liberals, the Democrats, you have to think of some other creative way to do it. Because it's not like people there don't love nature, you know? It's not like they don't want pollution. They don't want a degraded local environment. They don't want to have to drive by a pit mine every day. They want to be able to have a clean lake for recreation. They like songbirds. Like people, you don't have to be a Republican or a Democrat or left or right to value these things. So you just have to find a way to speak to those values and avoid the trigger language. I mean, I don't know. That's one of the things that that does work in many contexts. Yeah. Like I know people who are in the regenerative agriculture movement who are going to farmers in the high plains, and I mean every single one of these farmers is an evangelical Christian who voted for Donald Trump, but they're still signing up for this regenerative agriculture program, and the representatives of this organization who go there, they're not talking about carbon dioxide and climate change. They're talking about the soil. And, you know, why can't you drink the water from the well your granddaddy dug? Because it's so polluted with fertilizer runoff, you know?
Yeah.
Like this, yeah.
It seems like there's such a huge opportunity right now to meaningfully participate in the kind of ecological protection, restoration, and cultivation, growing food with each other. I remember like an inward cheer came out of me when I was reading your book, and you started to talk about the need for kind of a conservation corps, like worked really well back when they were active, and bringing something back like that that would be able to participate in the repairing of our waterways and the tissues and organs of our living planet, as you often talk about. Right now, we've started something here locally called the Neighborhood Resiliency Initiative to try to connect neighbors as close to home as possible to support each other in communal gardening and restoration projects. And I'm really wanting to model this program in such a way that it would allow city and county and nonprofit interests to really find it approachable and work together. Because, oh gosh, sometimes I feel really crazy for caring so much about ecology and growing our own food, because I look out at the authority that exists, whether it's religious or political authority, and I'm not seeing that same kind of drive to get involved in resiliency and restoring soils and working together for really a vision that I think everybody came out of the womb excited for, which is to be a part of this beautiful creation and to honor it. What opportunities do you think that we're closer to that because of this pandemic, to have like a conservation corps of sorts that would be able to get involved in these kinds of projects?
Oh, could be. I mean, there's certainly a lot of unemployed people who would love something useful to do. A lot of the jobs, as we've been hearing, are not coming back because some of the changes, the structural changes that are happening, will eliminate those jobs permanently. So people need something meaningful to do, and we could have some kind of service corps, which could include not just ecological service, but there's a lot of sick people out there, a lot of disabled people, a lot of elderly people who are, even before COVID, were not living good lives. There's a lot of service that could be done to heal our society as well as to heal our planet. And this is meaningful, satisfying work. And given that the productive economy, the production of goods, needs fewer and fewer people to operate, we're going to have lots of labor and creativity available to devote towards something like a conservation corps.
And how do we prepare for that transition to take place, right? Like living under this assumption that everybody has to have a job, no matter how meaningful or meaningless it is something I think really needs to start to shift. And I get concerned that for people to change, I think with the ecology movement and things like a conservation corps, getting people involved in meaningful activities when there is so much abundance of labor and creativity, it almost feels like everybody's looking around waiting for everyone to do it all at once. And yet there's still like those pioneers, or there's moments, there's pivotal things that finally come together that happen that get people really motivated and excited to dig in. And when we're building a community program like this, it's like, well, why isn't the city or the state doing something like that? What would you say to those that are kind of just like sitting back and waiting for a movement to envelop them? Is there a place for leadership, or like what kind of near-term threads are starting to emerge that would allow for something like this to really become part of our culture?
Well, yeah, it needs both leadership and a change of our conditions. Ideas like this have been around for a while, but any major change has seemed impossible. Society's been, as I was saying before, frozen in a holding pattern. And that can-do spirit that characterized America in the 1960s, say, in the 1950s. Yeah, we can build an entire highway system. Yeah, we can put a man on the moon. Yeah, we can do whatever we want to. Nothing is too hard for us. As Kennedy said, we seek to put a man on the moon, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. Like we had this collective will that we have not had for a long time. We've just been kind of trundling along on inertia. What stops that? What stops inertia? It's when you smack into a brick wall. It's when you lose steam and you grind to a halt. When that happens, then you can maybe change your direction. In order to change direction, you have to stop first. You know what I'm saying. So I think it is in those moments that a leader has any chance of changing anything. When the system is ruled by inertia, a leader is really nothing more than a functionary, an administrator. So we haven't been in a ripe climate for real leadership for a long time.
Because of your background with having written Sacred Economics, I want to touch on this just a little more, where if there were to be a center for neighborhood mutual aid, gardening, healing, connection, a place to unlock kind of the hidden potential of people bringing their resources together with their neighbors, what are some of the low-hanging fruit, like where have you seen people rolling with some of these? I mean, we might be a long way from a global economy that has a negative interest rate getting instituted, but what are some things that communities can do right away as we're stepping into this realm with more time and more ability to provide and more reason to provide mutual aid for those we're concerned about? What kinds of...
I think that it's unique to any community, and that first step starts with trying to understand what the needs are that are not being met, that maybe are not being met by the money economy, by the market economy. And then you get together and you try to figure out how to meet those needs. And maybe someone just starts doing it. And then other people, if it's working, other people, they join in. I don't have any special expertise in that. It happens spontaneously when there's some kind of disaster, a natural disaster, a man-made disaster. People come out of the woodwork and they start taking care of each other. That's and the ways that they take care of each other depend on the nature of the crisis. So I can't say, that you in Utah should do this or do that, or it's a community garden, or it's a tool library, or it's more important is just that formative principle.
Is to listen and find the needs of a given community and act on that most immediate need. I think I really needed to hear that, actually. I'm always so passionate about growing food and getting people in that space where they're enjoying the sunshine and learning how to heal soil and what it's like to participate. And it's a good reminder that we've got to keep listening. Communities are going to come up in so many different ways. I feel called at this point before we pivot to share. I was really impressed with the video I saw made of you recently, the Sustainable Human video that had excerpts from the Coronation that you wrote, really about the times that we're alive in right now. I would love to share that here for a few minutes, and then kind of come back and kind of reflect on what maybe might still be unsaid, if that's all right with you, Charles.
Sure. I haven't seen it yet either, so.
Oh, good. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, we're pulling that up right now. Really appreciate everybody that's been tuning in around this. Something that I always appreciate about Charles's work is the intent to be alive in the moments that we live through. And watching this video about an essay he wrote called the Coronation was a really beautiful way of saying what opportunities and what the mindset and the perspective that we should be having at a time when we are shifting as a society, and have this pause and this moment to think about what kind of leadership and programs and just what the kind of life that we're living, what opportunities we have. So please enjoy this video. Swear. Just getting the audio dialed in here with it. Are there any comments, perhaps from the live stream, that we could go to while we're getting that pulled up?
Yeah, there are. If I have mic, there have been a few really good ones and some mini conversations that have pulled through. Awesome. So the majority have been in agreement with the fact that the left-right dichotomy is a plague unto itself. There's a lot of conversation about including the bridge of communications in between economic and environmentalism. One of the comments reframing the questions and issues to avoid partisan instincts is a great solution. Economic growth and environmental sustainability don't need to be mutually exclusive. That's from Joey at 9th and 9th in Salt Lake City. There is also a question on inland port, but I don't know if you want to kind of digress into that. And then there's also education is always touted as a solution, but there is no singular silver bullet. Nonetheless, what can communities advocate for in education reform to help with these wicked problems? Both of those questions are opening up subject matters a little bit outside of where the conversation's been going.
I really like that question about education, and I think that that would be a good one to dive into with Charles here. Did you catch the question, Charles? Did you hear?
No, I couldn't really hear it.
Let's say it one more time, Maggie.
You can just give me the gist of it.
Let me just.
So the idea is there's no one silver bullet, but what can be done within the framework of education to help solve some of these problems we're having with disconnection and ecological disruption?
Yeah. Education is part of the problem, or schooling as we know it is part of the problem. It's a form of training in separation, in obedience to authority, in the worldview that has dominated civilization for a long time. It was really there. I mean, I think that in a way, the pause on going to school could end up being really, really helpful for our society, because it gives us a chance to question, do we really want to continue school as we have known it? There are three, I guess, tributaries feeding into the school system that we have today. One of them is to train people to be compliant members of a mass society. School as we know it was developed in the late 19th century to meet the problem of insubordinate labor. People who had been self-sufficient, farmers, craftspeople, who had done interesting, satisfying, meaningful work, then all of a sudden had to go to work in factories where they did repetitive, tedious, dangerous labor for 12 hours a day. I mean, it was horrific. Or even if you were a white collar worker, you were adding up columns of figures that were copying documents all day. And so people were not, they didn't take naturally to that. So the idea was born, and there are historical documents that actually say this explicitly. The idea was born to train people to perform simple tasks on command for external rewards. Those are called grades, and to obey authority, and to be intellectually and emotionally dependent on authority, and to compete for the rewards of the system. So school, that's one of the tributaries into school as we know it. Another tributary is the training of scholars. That's another tradition of schooling, which is a beautiful thing. I think society needs scholars. Probably 1 or 2 or 3% of a society should be devoted to learning, to scholarship, but not 50%, not 90%. So we have the system so we have basically like a watered down scholarship training system, which doesn't really serve very many students who have different ways of learning and different kinds of gifts. And we're trying to make everybody into an academic. And partly that's because of a civilizational mythology that venerates and elevates the pursuits of the mind. Anything that is farther away from the soil, farther away from materiality, that's where the status and prestige are. That's where we think that the human should be evolving toward. So this is highly problematic. I mean, I think we actually need to go back more to materiality and more to the soil. So anyway, those are two of the streams. And the third is basically daycare, for the parents to go to work and stuff. You have to have somewhere to warehouse the children during the day. So yeah, these three things, is that really what we want? Maybe we can take advantage of this pause to totally put everything on the table. And I know a lot of parents are doing it. It's like, wow, my kid's a little happier not having to get up at 6:18 every morning to catch the 7:02 bus to school. And then coming home and I have to enforce homework on them. And I become their slave master. It's kind of nice to have a break from that. And yeah, they should have opportunities to play with other kids, but at school they say you are not here to socialize. So this is this interruption in our inertia could give us the opportunity to broaden our questioning and really just take this pause. What do we want to create for our children and for our future? It's not just about taking some new item of curriculum and stuffing it into the same pedagogy in the same school system. That's not going to change anything.
Thank you. I know often here in Utah we have a very big problem with there being very, very underpaid teachers and huge classrooms. But this kind of idea of, are we really listening to the teachers and the students and looking at it from the health of that the educational opportunities that come, and not just kind of a blanket throw more money at it, but how do we actually take the time to listen and improve the systems that we're in, I think are critical. And I am getting a lot of that same feedback from parents that some of them are really starting to thrive in this environment, and there's a chance that we can reimagine some things. I actually just found out that my wife is pregnant with our firstborn, just as the grocery stores started having all the toilet paper fly off the shelves, we got the news. So it definitely, these kinds of topics are becoming much more alive in me now that we know that's going to happen for us in the near future. So, okay, I think we're good to go on the audio now of this video, and I think you'll enjoy it.
For a long time, civilization has been headed in a direction no one really wants to go.
Maybe you just refresh it real quick.
It's like we've been following a road.
Okay. Well,
for a long time,
you guys should definitely watch the new Sustainable Human video. We'll put the link in the comments. It really says beautifully. Good excerpts from the Coronation. Charles, you spent a lot of time working on that and being really present with what's going on in the world. And maybe instead of the video, since we don't have that opportunity right now, what has it been like since writing the Coronation, and how do you feel? I know we're right in the steps of a lot of states moving to like orange and yellow alerts, and kind of, this like dichotomy of liberty versus medical safety is just kind of, we're really in this place. And I don't want to ask you to summarize, but the spirit of what's possible, not just with politics, but what could we leave people with as they're tuned in with us tonight to help inspire change and possibility?
I will wrap it up with that, because I was my family is waiting for me also. The coronavirus is certainly showing us a lot about ourselves that we didn't know before, or that most of us didn't know before, or that wasn't as obvious. And one of the things that has been honestly like the most troubling to me is the reflexive trust in authority that, at least initially, most people seem to have, especially trust in medical authority, and how unquestioningly people accepted what are basically authoritarian or even totalitarian. I mean, everyone's in house arrest in a lot of places, basically. accepting surveillance and tracking of all of your contacts. I mean, that would be the dream of a totalitarian state, to know who you associate with at all times. And originally, like I was like, yeah, I mean, we got to flatten the curve, right? But that reason has not really been true for at least a month now. The curve is already peaked, yet we're still in some version of lockdown, or some partial opening in most places. And so people are beginning to ask, especially as the suffering from lockdown increases and is outstripping the suffering caused by the disease itself. If you don't believe me, I mean, look at what the United Nations, what's it called, the Food Agency, is saying about starvation this year. Something like 265 million people could face starvation. That's like 3 orders of magnitude more than have died from COVID. And it's being caused, in an ordinary year, 5 to 10 million people die of starvation, which is already 10 times more than have died of COVID. But, now we're talking another 100 times more than that. And it's like, so people are as they suffer the effects of loneliness and isolation and the economic effects, people are starting to question authority a bit more and to look at some of the medical and epidemiological assumptions that have justified the lockdown. And some of those are quite questionable, not just by left-wing or right-wing hippies or libertarians, but by medical experts who are a little bit marginalized. But, Dr. David Katz, for example, teaches at Yale Medical School. Dr. Zach Bush. There are alternative voices out there who are definitely not conspiracy theorists that I think we need to start listening to. As part of a reconception of even what health is and what the purpose of life is. Is the purpose of life to stay as safe as possible until you die? Obviously not. But that's kind of the direction we're going. Everybody in their own bubble because it's not safe to go out of it. And this gets into, the essay was 9,000 words long and there's audio versions that are like an hour long. So I'm not going to try to go into it all. But yeah, it's funny, as I criticize and question the official narrative and the official policies, people are like, oh, you must be a right-wing conspiracy theorist, Trump supporter. And I'm like, I thought it was the left that was supposed to be questioning authority here. And noting how the vulnerable are suffering even more under lockdown than the affluent for whom it's kind of an inconvenience. So I have to work at home now and I, can't go to my yoga class. I mean, there are people facing hunger because of this. I thought that was the left that was supposed to be sounding the alarm for that. So anyway, I guess I'm getting a little impatient with the smear of right-wing conspiracy theorists when you're just questioning an orthodoxy promulgated by large corporations, pharmaceutical corporations, and the central institutions of our civilization. I'll just leave it at that for now.
Beautiful. Thank you, Charles, so much for spending this hour with me and bringing your expertise and lens that I appreciate so much. And I hope to do you proud in service to life as we work hard in our communities here in Utah to embody this interconnection that we really all share and have such an opportunity to step into. I'll let you get back to being with your family. Charles, thank you so much for being with us. And for those that are still watching, I believe we have the video up and running now, and I think it would be wonderful to share that. So Charles, we'll go ahead and share that, and I appreciate you so much being here with us tonight.
Yeah, thanks, Michael.
Okay.
For a long time, civilization has been headed in a direction no one really wants to go. It's like we've been following a road with no exit ramp. Maybe we see a crossroads up ahead. It's just over the hill, around the bend, past the woods. Cresting the hill, you see you were mistaken. It was a mirage. It was farther away than you thought. You keep walking. Now, all of a sudden, we go around a bend, and here it is. After years of confinement to the road of our predecessors, now we finally have a choice. We are right to stop, stunned at the newness of our situation. Because of the 100 paths that radiate out in front of us, some lead in the same direction we've already been headed. Some lead to hell on earth. And some lead to a world more healed and more beautiful than we ever dared to believe possible. Last year, several million children died of hunger. Yet no government has declared a state of emergency or asked that we radically alter our way of life to save them. Nor do we see a comparable level of alarm and action around suicide, the autoimmunity epidemic, or obesity. Why, for that matter, are we not in a frenzy about averting nuclear Armageddon or ecological collapse? If we can change so radically for COVID-19, we can do it for these other conditions too. Let us ask why we are able to unify our collective will to stem this virus, but not to address other grave threats to humanity. The answer is revealing. Simply in the face of world hunger or ecological collapse, we as a society do not really know what to do. Our go-to crisis responses, all of which are some version of control, aren't very effective in addressing these conditions. Now, along comes a contagious epidemic, and finally we can spring into action. It is a crisis for which control works. Quarantines, lockdowns, isolation, hand washing, control of movement, control of information, control of our bodies. COVID-19 is a threat that we know how to meet. Today, most of our challenges no longer succumb to force. Our antibiotics and surgery fail to meet the surging health crises of autoimmunity, addiction, and obesity. Our guns and bombs, built to conquer armies, are useless to erase hatred abroad or keep domestic violence out of our homes. Our police and prisons cannot heal the breeding conditions of crime. Our pesticides cannot restore ruined soil. If there is one thing our civilization is good at, it is fighting an enemy. We welcome opportunities to do what we are good at, which prove the validity of our technologies, systems, and worldview. Thus, we single out COVID-19 as a call to arms, reorganizing society as if for a war effort, while treating as normal the possibility of nuclear Armageddon, ecological collapse, and 5 million children starving. There is an alternative to the paradise of perfect control that our civilization has so long pursued. We can take advantage of this pause, this break in normal, to turn onto a path of reunion, of holism, of the repair of community, and the rejoining of the web of life. COVID-19 is showing us that when humanity is united in common cause, phenomenally rapid change is possible. In coherency, humanity's creative powers are boundless. A few months ago, a proposal to halt commercial air travel would have seemed preposterous. Likewise, for the radical changes we are making in our social behavior, economy, and the role of government in our lives. COVID demonstrates the power of our collective will when we agree on what's important. What else might we achieve in coherency? What world shall we create? Do we double down on protecting the separate self? Or do we accept the invitation into a world where all of us are in this together? What should we do about the homeless? What should we do about the people in prisons? What should we do about the unemployed? What about all the hotel maids, the Uber drivers, the plumbers, the janitors, and the bus drivers and the cashiers who cannot work from home? How do we protect those susceptible to COVID invites us into how do we care for vulnerable people in general? For a long time, we as a collective have stood helpless in the face of an ever-sickening society. We have been stuck in these systems and the patterns that cause them. Now, COVID has given us a reset. As COVID stirs our compassion, more and more of us realize that we don't want to go back to a normal so sorely lacking it. We have the opportunity now to forge a new, more compassionate normal. That is the impulse that stirs in us. It is saying, let's get serious about taking care of each other. Let's remember how precious we all are and how precious life is. Let's take inventory of our civilization, strip it down to its studs, and see if we can build one more beautiful.
Thank you everybody for joining today on the Michael the Mayor In Service to Life live stream. We do this every Tuesday, and I am infinitely grateful for Charles coming in here and sharing his wisdom about this campaign. I think next week is an episode that you'll really enjoy. We're bringing on Howie Hawkins, which is one of the leading presidential candidates for the Green Party, as well as members from the Green Party of Utah that are working hard to bring in these principles, these ideas that if protecting clean air and clean water and healthy soils and bringing our communities back together and bringing transparency and direct democracy back into the game is important to you, this is a campaign to watch, and I think you'll enjoy tuning in next week. Please, if you do feel called to donate to the campaign, you can visit michaelthemayor.com to make that happen. Right now, there is an enormous amount of money put into the intentional disinformation that is flooding the internet, and we have an opportunity with independent media, with someone that if you look into, I've been working on behalf of the community for almost a decade. I'm not coming from wealthy families or a political dynasty or in the pocket of corporate interests. We have a chance to really bring some light into this situation and focus on these principles that we know are so important. So if you do feel called to donate, we can run a campaign that allows us to reach not just people in the county, but ideally across the nation, bringing these messages together and showing that political change is happening alongside the pace of our awareness rising in our political spectrum. Also, the neighborhood resiliency for those that are wanting to connect with the earth and get back into growing their own food. We've been working really hard here locally and are excited for it to spread into other communities. Please check out neighborhoodresiliency.com. This has been a major place of organizing for us where we can address the fact that so much unnecessary starvation and stress and the degradation of our soils. Let's work together to make something positive happen. This neighborhood resiliency platform is meant to be able to be started in any community anywhere. So this is a great chance to get involved with that. I also really want to see people where they're proud of themselves for being in service to life themselves, whether that's at a communal gardening project or whether you're providing mutual aid or whatever it means to you. If you use the hashtag #InServiceToLife, we'll be bringing up examples on next week's live stream of in service to life happening in communities wherever it may be. Thank you so much for taking the time today to share and like and comment. It makes a world of difference right now, especially where political campaigns are so hamstringed because we're not able to do the door-to-door knocking because of the pandemic that's going on. So really the digital street team is how we reach people and counter and bring forth more beautiful opportunities for our communities. So thank you so much for tuning in today and for engaging. You can even join the In Service to Life community Facebook group. Is a place that will be sharing the live streams as they come out, news around this campaign and others, and examples of communities being in service to life. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining today, and may the more beautiful world that your hearts know is possible manifest as quickly and consciously as possible. Thank you.